Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala Rasulillahil Kareem. Amma ba'd. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Rabbi zidni ilma. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahima wa ala ali Ibrahima innaka Hamidum Majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad kama barakta ala Ibrahima wa ala ali Ibrahima innaka Hamidum Majid. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome everybody. May the peace, mercy and choicest blessings of Allah be upon you all. I'm your host, Iram Imam, for the Legacy Tour, and we are joined again by our beloved speaker, Ustadha Fatima Barkatulla. She's a British author and Alimah. She's also the IlmFeed presenter and a student of Islamic law at the University of London. She will be taking us back to the 7th century, to the land of Arabia, and she will be sharing with us some parts of the life of our mother Aisha radiallahu anha, so that we can learn more about her powerful lessons to guide us and inspire us in our own lives. And before I begin, I will tell you, if you're new to the Legacy Tour, a little bit about us. We explore the lives of Muslim women throughout the ages who rose to great heights. They overcame incredible odds and they left a lasting legacy for those to come after. So we are documenting these inspiring stories of the past as related to us by our foremost female Muslim scholars of today. And we have also Quranic recitations from talented Qariya. So the Legacy Tour, it's brought to you by Being Me Canada. It's a Muslimah empowerment organization, and we aspire to be the leading Muslimah empowerment organization focusing on faith, confidence, action, and community. So you can find us online or in person as the largest Muslim women's conference. And inshallah, we can meet again safely soon. So we're happy you're spending this time in a beneficial way. May Allah reward you, put barakah in your time and your learning. We hope that you benefit loads and that you pass the information on to those that are near and dear to you. And we have we're live on Facebook. So if you would like to tell us where you're joining us from, we would love to know. If you have any questions for our speaker today, you can mention them in the comment section and we will deliver your questions to Ustadha Fatima Barkatulla. So, and also we have a survey. If you could fill that survey out to help us improve, we would really appreciate that. Okay, and before we begin, we always start our Legacy Tour by some of our esteemed Qariya who have spent years memorizing the Quran. So today we have Hafida Ishal Adnan. She's joining us from Calgary in Canada. She is 15 years old. She's literally grown up with us. She's in grade 10. She's completed multiple courses from Al Huda Institute. She enjoys volunteering in her school and community. And mashallah, she's memorized the entire Quran and she's working towards completing her tafsir course. Jazakillah khairan Hafida Ishal for joining us, and she'll be reciting Surah Muzammil, ayahs 1 to 14 today.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها المزمل قم الليل إلا قليلا نصفه أو انقص منه قليلا أو زد عليه ورتل القرآن ترتيلا إنا سنلقي عليك قولا ثقيلا إن ناشئة الليل هي أشد وطئا وأقوم قيلا إن لك في النهار سبحا طويلا واذكر اسم ربك وتبتل إليه تبتيلا رب المشرقين رب المشرق والمغرب لا إله إلا هو فاتخذه وكيلا واصبر على ما يقولون واهجرهم هجرا جميلا وذرني والمكذبين أولي النعمة أولي النعمة ومهلهم قليلا إن لدينا أنكالا وجحيما وطعاما ذا غصة وعذابا أليما يوم ترجف الأرض والجبال وكانت الجبال كثيبا مهيلا صدق الله العظيم.
Jazakallah khairan, Hafida Ishal. Mashallah, beautiful recitation. You are literally blossoming in front of our own eyes, mashallah. And may Allah bless you and your family. And I know your sister is going to be reciting tomorrow for our legacy tour. So both of you, Hafidas, mashallah, your parents, may Allah bless your parents. I'd like to now introduce to you our speaker today. I'm absolutely delighted. Ustadha Fatima Barkatulla is joining us again. I will tell you a little bit more about Ustadha Fatima. She's a British Alimah, author, and presenter for IlmFeedPodcast. She is currently a postgraduate student of Islamic law at School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. She has a rich Islamic education from an early age, thanks to her parents, her father being a senior mufti in the UK Sharia Council. In her teens, she studied Arabic and the Islamic sciences in Egypt at prominent institutes such as Al-Fajr Center, Cordoba Institute, and College of Al-Azhar University. She's a graduate with 2 Alimah degrees, the first from Al-Salam Institute, where she was awarded a distinction by Sheikh Muhammad Akram Nadwi. She's also a graduate from the Ibrahim College Seminary with a specialization in fiqh. She's married with 4 children. She's also the author of Khadijah, Mother of History's Greatest Nation, and currently authoring a book about Aisha radiallahu anha. She's been a key contributor to the discourse surrounding Muslim women in the West, contributing to the Westminster Faith debates, documentaries, and live shows for this BBC, the Times of Faith section, Channel 4, and the Islam Channel. She presents the popular IlmFeedPodcast, which you might have seen. Like, we have so many videos of those going around, mashallah. She's also the director of Seeds of Change. It's the biggest Muslim women's conference in Europe, and a dawah trainer for IERA. And in 2014, she was awarded the Econ Ukhwan International Award for Young Muslim Women in Dawah and Community Service at a ceremony in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. You can find out more about Ustadha Fatima. We'll put the links in the caption for this video, so you can follow her on Facebook, on Twitter, and benefit from her posts. So today, the Legacy Tour, it takes us on a journey to discover the life and legacy left behind by the esteemed companion and wife of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Aisha binte Abi Bakr radiallahu anha. We will walk in her footsteps to gain lessons from her. She was al-Mu'mineen, mother of the believers, wife of the Prophet, a scholar, and daughter of the first Khalifa of Islam, Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu. So, Ustadha Fatima, welcome back to the Legacy Tour Online. Thank you for coming back again. Last time you were here, you shared a very contemporary story, that of Ella Little Collins, Malcolm X's little sister in February. So now you're taking us all the way from the 20th century back to the 7th century. We're very curious to hear about this famous companion of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May Allah's choicest blessings be upon him.
Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum, dear sisters. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. I thought, in talking about our mother Aisha radiallahu anha, mother of the believers, that a good way of doing it would be to just focus on 5 lessons from her life, because there's so much we could learn from her, and her life was so long. A lot of people don't realize that our mother Aisha radiallahu anha, she was just 18 years old when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, which means that in the majority of her life, she actually lived after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She was about 67 when she passed away. So I think it's about 58 Hijri that she passed away. So you can imagine, like, that's a very long life, mashallah, and so much happened after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And yet most of us probably know more about her life during the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because of course that was very important. That was the most important time of her life. But I've distilled 5 lessons, and the reason why I've been focusing on Mother Aisha is I'm actually writing a book, Aisha, about Mother Aisha. And it's, again, a children's book similar to the book Khadijah, but this time, you know, there's so much information that it could be put in that book, you know, so much that we know about Aisha, much more than we know about Khadijah, because of course Khadijah radiallahu anha passed away in the time in Mecca. And in the Meccan period, there wasn't that culture or need to convey hadiths and to kind of preserve hadiths. But of course, in the Medinan period, when Aisha lived, there was. So we know so much more about Mother Aisha. So 5 big lessons from her life. The first lesson that I would say, and I've tried to make these a bit different from Khadijah, because of course we could say about most of the, or all of the great women of Islamic history, we could say about them, they were great and devoted wives, right? But I think because I've already mentioned that in the life of Khadijah, I'm focusing on slightly different qualities in this session. So the first lesson or quality that we could really learn from our Mother Aisha is to be a keen student and teacher. You know, Aisha radiallahu anha, one of her gifts was that she was very curious. She was very observant. She observed, when you read her hadiths, she noticed the little details. She could talk about people's emotions. You know, those are quite feminine things if you think about it. And so we're really lucky, and we're really blessed that we had somebody as observant and articulate as our Mother Aisha to convey that to us. And it was because she was so curious and willing to question and not afraid to question that we have so much information in her hadiths that the scholars of Islam have been able to benefit from. But also it was her willingness to convey that information, right? She not only learned the most intimate details of life with Rasulullah, the Messenger of Allah, the model for humanity, but she also made it her life's mission to convey that knowledge, right? In order to preserve the Sunnah, to preserve that legacy. And I think one of the qualities that she had was confidence. She wasn't afraid to ask questions. You know, sometimes as students, when we're at university, for example, we feel a bit in awe of the system. We feel in awe of our teachers, professors, etc. So that might stop us from asking questions, or that might make us think, you know, who am I to criticize or question what's being said? But you notice about Aisha radiallahu anha that if something didn't really make sense to her, she wasn't afraid to say, but doesn't the Quran say this? Or, you know, like she was willing to question, she was willing to ask follow-up questions to make sure she understood something properly. And that's something we can all learn from, because the scholars said there are 2 types of people who won't be able to seek knowledge properly. One is a person who's too arrogant, and the other is a person who's too shy. Why? Because if you're too arrogant, you won't want to ask questions because you'll be too embarrassed. You'll think, I don't want people to know that I don't know the answer, right? You're too busy thinking, you know, I want to look good in front of other people. So you won't ask questions. And if you're too shy, you'll be too embarrassed to ask questions. What if my question sounds stupid? You know, what if somebody laughs? What if I'm the only one who has this question? You know, these are the sorts of things that people sometimes think. But actually, in my own experience, when you ask a question, however basic it seems, 9 times out of 10, a lot of the people in the class had the same question, but they were just too afraid to ask, you know? And if you're the one who's asking the questions, you're the one who's probably going to understand the thing the best once it's explained, right? So I think that's another thing we can learn from our mother Aisha. She was not too shy and she was not at all arrogant. The Sahaba, like Abu Musa, for example, he reported that we never had a problem occur to us, the companions of the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but that we would ask Aisha and find that she knew something about it, right? So there was no topic that you could go to Aisha about, and she would know something about it, which shows you, doesn't it, like what a keen student she was. One of the scholars of the past, he said, when she was faced with something that she did not know, she was not able to stand without learning more, right? So she wasn't just like, okay, whatever this person has told me, I'm just going to accept it. She wants to know more. She wants to make sure she understood fully. And also then as a teacher, because that's important too, isn't it? It's all very well absorbing and learning a lot of knowledge, but passing it on is another thing, right? And our mother Aisha did that very diligently. She was not afraid to teach. She was not afraid to correct people even, right? There are whole collections of her corrections of the Sahaba. So issues that they had expressed an opinion about, that she knew something else about, or she felt that they had misunderstood, and then she corrected. But she did it with the best adab, you know. She would always say, for example, may Allah have mercy on Abu Huraira. Maybe he didn't hear the whole story. This is what happened, right? May Allah have mercy on such and such, before she corrected them. So she wasn't doing it in a harsh way, right? Lesson number two that I think we can learn from our mother Aisha is that don't let your work compromise your values and your hijab, for example, right? If you think about it, the mothers of the believers, they actually had a harder or a more kind of, what could you say, a more conservative, higher level of hijab than the average women, you know? They were expected, so the rules for them were different, right? Nobody was allowed to marry them, for example, after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They became the mother of the believers. They had to live a very austere life when they were with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even though he could have lived a more luxurious life, because he chose as the messenger of Allah to live a very simple life. They had to accept that as well. Of course, he gave them the choice, and they all accepted, including our mother Aisha. But in terms of hijab, they had to have an extra layer when they were in the presence of non-mahrams. So for example, it wasn't enough for them just to be covered and their faces covered. They did used to cover their faces as well. That's one thing we know about the mothers of the believers. But they also had to be either behind a curtain or some kind of other extra covering, you know. So for example, when they were traveling on a camel, when they were traveling, going on Hajj or going anywhere, they had like a hawdaj, which is it's like a tent, almost like a tent structure on top of the camel. And they would be inside that, you know. It wasn't enough for them just to be in hijab and niqab, etc. That was their hijab, basically. And originally the word hijab in the Quran does mean curtain, doesn't it? It means that extra layer that they had to have. And so that meant that, of course, that's like some people might consider that to be like an extra hardship, right? But our mother Aisha radiallahu anha, she maintained her hijab in the best way, while at the same time teaching thousands of hadith, right? Over 2,000 hadiths. She was the second greatest narrator of hadith. So this shows you, this is a lesson for us as Muslim women, you know, because sometimes you hear Muslim women say things like, you know, I might have to compromise my hijab because of my work, right? Or they might try to tone down certain things, or feel like they have to westernize it, or they have to, you know, expose certain parts of their body, etc., in order to almost fit in, right? But if somebody like our Mother Aisha could do such a great service to Islam whilst maintaining her hijab, it means that we too can do that, you know, inshallah. We just have to have the conviction and the will. And our hijab, our values need to be non-negotiable in our minds, right? Everything else is negotiable. Our hijab, our values, our modesty, our dignity, they're not negotiable. So I think that's another thing we can learn about our Mother Aisha, that she was able to do all that she did without once compromising her hijab. The third lesson that we can learn from the life of our Mother Aisha is how to recover from failures, from things that seem like failures, and how to be willing to change. So we know that after the killing or the assassination of Uthman radiallahu anhu, okay, and obviously we don't have time to go into the whole story here, but please go and look it up, you know, if you want to. You can listen to, I know Sheikh Yasir Qadi, for example, he has lectures on the whole history of this. After the killing of Uthman radiallahu anhu, the Sahaba, they felt very strongly about bringing the assassins of Uthman radiallahu anhu to justice. And many people believe that those assassins, some of them had hidden in the army, or the army of Ali radiallahu anhu, who was now the Khalifa, right? And of course, the great companion Ali radiallahu anhu, he wanted to bring the assassins to justice as well, but he wanted to wait a little bit because he had just become leader of the state and he wanted to settle certain things. He wanted to sort certain things out. And he was facing rebellion from some sides. But the main reason for the rebellion was that people were upset that the killers of Uthman, it seemed, had been able to run away and had run away maybe to Iraq or within the army of Ali radiallahu anhu. So many of the Sahaba felt so strongly about it that they decided that they would march to Iraq to make a protest, like a protest, you know, to make a big kind of symbolic gesture to say, no, we want the killers of Uthman radiallahu anhu to be brought out, and we want them to be brought to justice. And two of the brother-in-laws of Aisha radiallahu anha, who were Talha bin Ubaidillah and Az-Zubair bin al-Awwam, they are both great Sahabis, you know, they're from the 10 Promised Paradise. They came to Aisha radiallahu anha, who happened to be in Mecca after Hajj. And they said to her, you know, you are seen as a symbol. You are the mother of the believers. If you come with us on this journey to Iraq, then inshallah, people will see, people will rally behind everyone. We could bring peace in the ummah. We could quash the rebellion and just kind of reconcile between the sides, because we will have brought the killers of Uthman to justice. And so Aisha radiallahu anha was convinced, and she began the long journey all the way to Iraq. And on the way there, we know like thousands and thousands of people, when they saw the hodaj, remember her hodaj was very symbolic. It must have been marked in a very specific way. So when people saw her camel and her hodaj, and this is like a generation now, many of the Sahaba were not there anymore. Now it was the Tabi'in, and they would have seen, you know, her going. They would feel so emotional seeing our Mother Aisha, you know, part of this protest, part of this march. So they all started joining, you know, so thousands and thousands of people joined, until by the time they got there, there were like tens of thousands. But we know that on the way, Aisha radiallahu anha, during the night she heard the sound of dogs barking. And this reminded her of something that the Prophet ﷺ had said to her. So she quickly asked her companions, she said, where are we? Where is this place? And they said it is, I think, an oasis called Hawab. And then she said, oh no. And she said, I don't think this is going to be good for us, for anyone. I want to go back. She said, I remember Rasulullah ﷺ, once when us wives, we were all together with him, he said, what will be the state of one of you when the dogs of Hawab will bark? And she said he had mentioned it in a negative way. And so she wanted to go back, and she pleaded to them to go back. She realized this would not end well. And everyone convinced her to carry on. They said, no, ya al-Mu'minin, you will help reconcile between the Muslims through this action of yours. And so she realized she couldn't go back, and she continued. And of course, this eventually, because of some misunderstandings, you can look them up, inshallah, it led to the first big battle between Muslims. And her intention had never been for there to be a battle, and nor had it been the intention of Ali radiallahu anhu. But because of a misunderstanding, because of the trouble caused by some of the assassins of Uthman radiallahu anhu between the two camps, unfortunately, it led to this terrible battle, and many Muslims were killed. And eventually, the camel of our mother Aisha radiallahu anha was, either hit or its legs were severed, and it came crashing down onto the ground because she actually went right into the middle of the battle with her camel as a symbol to stop everyone from fighting. SubhanAllah, it really shows you the bravery of our mother Aisha. When she saw that people were fighting, she wanted to stop it, and she went right in the middle just for people to come to their senses. When they see that the wife of the Prophet ﷺ is in the middle, she could get hurt. And indeed, that did end the battle. The battle ended, and Ali radiallahu anhu sent Aisha's brother, Muhammad bin Abi Bakr, to come and take Aisha out of the Hawdaj, make sure she was safe. And he did that. And then Ali radiallahu anhu had our mother Aisha accompanied by the noblest women from his own family and some guards all the way back to, I think she went to Mecca as it was Hajj season again, all the way back home, basically. And on that way, I think our mother Aisha was very sad. And all throughout her life, she always regretted this. She always regretted this. And she remembered the verses of the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had said to the wives of the Prophet, وَقَرْنَ فِي بُيُوتِكُنَّ وَلَا تَبَرَّجْنَ تَبَرُّجَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ الْأُولَى. And stay in your homes. Stay in your homes and do not display your beauty as it used to be displayed in the days of Jahiliyyah. And this was a verse, whenever it came in the Salah, she would start crying because she felt that this was advice that she wished that she had followed, Now, any one of us, if we had faced something like that, any human being, when you face something and you realize that you made a mistake, or you feel that you should have done something else, or you had the best of intentions, and yet it ended badly, we would feel like giving up, right? But our mother Aisha, she just changed her direction after that. She decided not to be involved in political things anymore. And she decided, I believe she was following the ayah that follows the ayah I just mentioned, which was Surah Al-Ahzab, ayah number 33, in which Allah says to the wives of the Prophet, وَاذْكُرْنَ مَا يُتْلَى فِي بُيُوتِكُنَّ مِنْ آيَاتِ اللَّهِ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. Allah says to them, and recite what has been recited or rehearsed in your homes of the signs of Allah, the ayat of Allah, and his wisdom, hikmah. What is the hikmah? Hikmah is the sunnah, right? And I believe that she took this on board. And from that time onwards, instead of allowing that negative incident to make her give up or not to stop doing anything fruitful or to feel like she has nothing to contribute, instead, she just changed her direction and she doubled down on doing what she believed Allah wanted her to do, which was to preserve the sunnah, to make sure that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's sunnah was preserved and hence Islam was preserved. Lesson number 4 and 5 I will do quickly. Lesson number 4, respond with dignity to hardship and injustice. When the hypocrites spread rumors about our Mother Aisha during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, it was devastating. She was just a teenager, right? She was a pure teenager. And unfortunately, some of the Muslims had also indulged in the rumors, but we see from the behavior of our Mother Aisha that she responded with dignity. Even afterwards, when some Muslims were punished for spreading the rumor, and of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cleared her name from above the 7 heavens, right? In Quranic ayat. Even after some Muslims were punished, she never liked their names to be mentioned in a negative way. You know, even though they had done something against her. So for example, Hassan bin Thabit, he had been one of the, radiallahu anhu, he had been involved in the rumors. Of course, he repented and he was punished for that. But Aisha's nephew says, Aisha disliked to have Hassan mentioned in a bad way, and he criticized in her presence, because she used to say, it was he who said, فَإِنَّ أَبِي وَوَالِدَهُ وَعِرْضِي لِعِرْضِ مُحَمَّدٍ مِنْكُمْ وِقَاءُ. She remembered some verses that, because Hassan bin Thabit was the poet of Rasulullah, right? She remembered some verses he had made, and she said, you can't say anything bad about somebody who's made verses like this, because the verse means, it means, I put forward my father and my grandfather and my own honor to shield the honor of Muhammad from you. You know, subhanallah, such beautiful words, you know. And so Aisha radiallahu anha said, never criticize him because he said these words, which were so important. So subhanallah, she never held grudges against people. And the fifth lesson is use your talents to serve Allah. Our Mother Aisha radiallahu anha, she never had children, right? But you can tell that she really loved children, because what she did was, even though she didn't have children, she still focused on the youth, and she managed to raise orphans, many of her own nephews and nieces, right? Who then became some of the greatest scholars. So she couldn't be a mother, but she could invest in youth in another way, right? And she did that very diligently. Some of her famous students, Qasim bin Muhammad, the son of her own brother who was assassinated later, he became one of the greatest fuqaha of Medina, right? Urwa bin az-Zubair, who again was her nephew, right? Became one of the greatest fuqaha of Medina. She had female students like Aisha bint Talha. Again, she was her niece. And Amra bint Abdurrahman, who was a great student of hers, and the scholars used to send people to go and learn from her. And one of the scholars said about her, she was a boundless ocean of knowledge. These are the type of people that Aisha radiallahu anha built. And just to end, you know, she used to sit in her home. She would have the orphans and the children in her first rows learning from her, and women as well. And then she would have a curtain, and then men would be able to sit behind the curtain and listen to her speak. So look at how our Mother Aisha radiallahu anha used the resources that she had. And to be honest, there are so many more lessons I could mention, but I've just focused on these 5. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward our Mother Aisha. And I do hope that we internalize these lessons from her life. Jazakumullahu khairan. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.
Jazakillah khairan, Ustadha Fatima. I think you've shared so many things that sometimes you think you know a story, but you shared things that I've never heard before. I feel like researching it now and looking it up. And I think your book is on this topic too, right? You're writing about Aisha radiallahu anha. So maybe we can find more information about the story of Aisha radiallahu anha in your book. Am I correct?
Definitely, inshallah. So just look out for the book. It should be out next year, inshallah, published by Learning Roots.
Yeah, I'm sure you could do different sessions based on so many points or just on her life, right? But you shared, okay, so I'm going to summarize. I think I missed one point. Like you said, one was to be a keen student and a teacher, right? Which it's so true. The thing that you said about being curious, observant, asking questions, because what's inside your head is not inside everybody else's head. So you need to just, have the courage to be able to ask. It'll help everyone grow together, right? And then don't let your values be compromised, right? That's what you said. Don't let your values
do your work without compromising your values.
Without compromising your values, right? And
especially
then
hijab. I was especially focusing on hijab,
right? And that's so true, because there are situations where you feel like you just need to blend in, and make everybody happy, but that's not our point, right? Our point is to make Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala happy. Okay, and then you talked about responding with dignity. I know I'm missing one point. Responding with dignity. That I think whenever just treating everybody with dignity all of the time, it's not that hard.
And not holding grudges. That was part of that as well.
Not all. That was part of.
I think you missed number 3, which was recovering from failure. And being willing to change. Be willing to change after a failure, after something that has set you back. Doesn't make you completely wither away. It makes you just change your direction. That's it. Ask yourself, what does Allah want? What's the next move? What's the best move now?
A failure doesn't mean the end. It doesn't mean that okay, now you're completely. You can learn. Find out what went wrong and fix yourself from that, right? So alhamdulillah, very good advice. And then you said use your talents and resources. Right?
Use your talents to serve the cause of Allah. So, and never feel that your situation is like disadvantaged. Like our mother Aisha, we said she was not a mother, for example. And obviously being a mother is one of the key ways to be able to build another human being, right? Or to convey Islam to the next generation, etc. But that didn't stop her from doing that same thing, which is conveying Islam and teaching the next generation, and even mothering, because she raised some of her own nephews and nieces. She used to take care of orphans and gave a lot of attention to her students. So
and being resourceful. Sometimes we sit and we say, oh, I could have done this if I had this or if I had that. But instead of thinking of it that way, you just, whatever I have, let me use it to the best of my ability. And if you think about it, we're talking about 7th century Arabia. She didn't have as much as maybe what we have at our disposal, but yet, she had such a great impact on all of us, especially with the knowledge that she's transferred over to us. Ustadha Fatima, I know you covered these topics a little bit, but not really. But I have a question that's come in that I'd like to ask you.
Sure.
One is obviously what story of Aisha radiallahu is not covered without this controversial question, right? That she was victimized. She is victimized as being portrayed as a little young girl who got married to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam at a tender age, and she's villainized by Muslims and non-Muslims. And you mentioned the conflict, so I won't go into that. But she's tremendously loved by all of us. Can you touch upon this controversy for us?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's actually a very good infographic you can look up from the Yaqeen Institute. If you just look up Yaqeen Institute, the age of Aisha, something like this, you'll find it. And it really explains it in a lot of detail, I think, in a very good way. I think Ustadha Nuruddin Knight, she was one of the people who put that together. And okay, so with the age of our mother Aisha, when she got married, I guess that's what the issue is. To be honest, nobody really brought this issue up until modern times, relatively modern times, right? And it was brought up by people who wanted to, cast aspersions on the Prophet ﷺ. But, it was 100% normal in that time. And even today in certain places, for young people to get married, right? For people to get married when they're very young. I think my own grandparents in India, they were married when they were teenagers. It's normal, like young teenagers, not even older ones. And there are places all around the world where it's fine to get married, when under the age of 16 even. Now, so we shouldn't be looking at the past, at history, through the lens of our current norms, That's called presentism. It means you're using the lens of today, the norms of today, to judge the people of yesterday. When that was the norm for them, that was the norm for them. What they used to do is when a girl would be betrothed for marriage, for example, even a boy could be betrothed. Before she married the Prophet ﷺ, Aisha was due to marry somebody else, That kind of shows you that it wasn't a controversial thing at all. And what would happen is sometimes they would do the nikah, right? Same as Aisha, they had the nikah. And then when they felt, and the parents felt that the girl was old enough and mature enough, then they would have, like what Asians would call the rukhsati, right? They would then start to live together. And so our mother Aisha began to live with the Prophet ﷺ in Medina. Okay. Even though they were married, the nikah took place in Mecca. So that was the norm in that time. We don't see in our mother Aisha the profile of an abused woman. If anything, she was the one who was like strong personality. She could shut anyone up. Really, like once when one of the wives came and complained about something, I think Zainab bin Jahsh, that everyone was always giving gifts to the Prophet ﷺ on the day when he was with Aisha, right? Mm-hmm. And Aisha answered her with such strong words, And Zainab looked to the Prophet ﷺ, can you look what she's saying? She's being so sharp with me. And Rasulullah said, what can I do? She's the daughter of Abu Bakr, In other words, she's her father is an eloquent man. She's an eloquent girl, and she's able to answer anyone back. So she didn't have the profile of an oppressed person at all, right? Now, that was the norm then. It was the norm all over the world, by the way, even in the West, even in European countries, right? People had shorter lives. Like, if you think about it, I think the life expectancy at that time was 30 something or 40. If we knew that everyone was going to die at about 40, right? Mm-hmm. Don't you think we would make our childhood shorter? Do you know what I mean? Like, because we feel, okay, a life is 80, 70, we think, okay, let's elongate childhood as much as possible, right? But in that time, life was short, you grow up quickly. You even people probably had their periods earlier. And that is really the marker for a Muslim of adulthood, isn't it? So now, fast forward to today, that doesn't mean that you have to do that now, because it's not the norm for our times for children or for people at a very young age to get married. And that's okay, right? Doesn't mean we have to translate the norms of that time to our times. maybe young people in our times are not ready for that, right? In fact, I think a lot of our, especially boys, are not ready until they're well into their 20s, right?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like times change.
We've elongated childhood from,
Yeah.
childhood to the late teens to the 20s to, I think sometimes even in the 30s, we were still children. So childhood has
Right.
been
Look at Osama bin Zaid. He was leading an army when he was 18.
Yeah.
He was leading the army. Like, hello, do you know what I mean? It's a completely different time scale to us.
Yeah.
Our kids can barely look after themselves when they're 18, right? Like, let alone lead an army.
It's also reflective of our psyche. It's okay for people to have boyfriends and girlfriends and maybe even get pregnant, but it's the minute you put the marriage logo on top, then
yes,
it becomes,
exactly.
controversial.
See, this is another fallacy, isn't it? That's another fallacy of our times.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Britain it used to be the kind of place with the largest teenage pregnancies, not just boyfriend, teenage pregnancies, right?
Yeah.
In Europe. Subhanallah, so you can see that there's a double standard there that's being
No, I think that was a very comprehensive answer, Ustadha Fatma, because sometimes even with us Muslims, sometimes you see things written online and you hear stuff, so you become a little bit confused about these topics. So it's good to, get ourselves, a more balanced view and an overall view, right, of the whole situation and not blow it out of proportion. I have another question. I guess this is building on from the last question, but maybe I'll leave that part of the question out. We're confused by her complex legacy. And what's her greatest legacy? What would, if a young listener who was listening to the story of Aisha versus an older sister, what would they take away from her story?
That's difficult to say. What's her greatest legacy?
Yeah.
But if we want to say the thing that impacted the most Muslims, you could say, was definitely her understanding and conveying the Sunnah, her preservation of the Sunnah, I would say. But I would say there's another side to her that we don't often look at, which is her ibadat, because it's very easy to point to something public that someone does and think that was their greatest legacy. But when you read about the way she used to worship Allah, long salahs, any money that was given to her, because the state used to give the wives of the Prophet a stipend, right? She would give it away immediately, like to different causes, even her poor students or subhanallah, sadaqah, right? She used to try to make Hajj all the time. Why? Because, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that the jihad for women is Hajj. Yeah. Since he said that to her, she made it a point to go on Hajj as much as possible. You see, so there's that side of her that we don't focus on, because in our times we really focus on the outward, like public success or public service. But I think the bedrock of any Muslim is really what they do in private, isn't it? So I don't think we can ever discount that, and the fact that she served Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam all those years. She was the one whose house he wanted to be in when he was in his final illness. That's not just an honor, that's also a huge responsibility, because that means she was nursing him, serving him, and it's not easy to serve and nurse an ill person, right? SubhanAllah. So I think we have to remember all of that.
What's astounding is, like you mentioned, that she was only with Rasulullah for 8 years of her life, and all this knowledge is coming from those 8 years, subhanallah.
I think about 9 years. Yeah.
And okay, And you know, it's all the stories, and even in the conversation that you're sharing, it just makes you so blessed that alhamdulillah we have a history that is documented, and it's almost like as you live through life, it's a gift that keeps giving, and you keep learning more and more. You think, okay, I've learned, and now there's more to learn, subhanallah.
Yeah.
So yeah. And I don't think we have any more questions coming in. I was just checking the questions, monitoring them, but there's lots of comments. People are enjoying the talk.
Yeah.
Ustadha Fatma, I'd really like to thank you for coming yet again to the Legacy Tour. You have one more event left with us. That's in a few more months' time, looking into the next year. So inshallah, we'll see you back then again. And you know, listeners, if you would like to follow Ustadha Fatma, you can follow her on her Facebook page or on her Twitter account. You'll have the links in our caption or in our comment section, so you can follow her there. Be sure to fill out our survey to help us grow and learn and become better. And if I could ask our IT staff to post up the flyers for the next events that are coming up. There's one coming up just a few minutes after we finish over here. And then we will ask our Hafida Ishal to come and do the closing recitation. So coming up soon, no, sorry, coming up tomorrow. Today is October the 30th. Is Coffee Therapy. The topic is Mindful Social Media Practices with Shamima Kraba. She's a content creator and author. You can register for this at attendbm.com. And we also have games night tomorrow. This is for girls ages 10 to 16. So it's tomorrow. You can join us. It's at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, Toronto time, New York time. So please register for that. There's lots of fun things, scavenger hunt, craft, Quran games. You're going to have a good time, inshallah. And then tomorrow, we also have our legacy tour with Dr. Farah Islam. She's from Toronto. She will be sharing with us the story of Sulaim, radiallahu anha. So inshallah, I hope to see you guys tomorrow as well. And, you know, we continue this. And if you have stories that you want to hear about, drop the ideas in the comment section, and we will look at them. And inshallah, we will ask some of our speakers to tell those stories. And right after this program, as soon as we finish, at 11 o'clock in about 35 minutes, we have Power Talk. It's a halaqah. We're doing tafsir of Surah Mulk with different speakers. Right now, I think it's Sister Shela Hussein. So you can join us. You can register. It's a closed Zoom meeting, so you have to register for it at attendbm.com. Okay, so that's it. And so I would, so thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us in this journey in learning about illustrious women of the past. We hope that you can continue in your journey. You know, if you've missed any of the legacy tours and you want to hear some of those stories about women who've lived in the past, you can find them on our Facebook pages and a few on our YouTube channel. It's called it's called Being Me Canada. For future events, you can register at attendbm.com, right? So inshallah, you can benefit. Hafida Ishal, can I please ask you to do our closing recitation?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. By the passage of time, surely humanity is in grave loss. Except for those who have faith, do good, and urge each other to the truth, and urge each other to perseverance. Sadaqallahu al-Azim.
Jazakillah khairan. Hafida Ishal, Jazakillah khairan. And I'd like to thank again, on behalf of Being Me Canada, the Legacy Tour Group, to Ustadha Fatima Barkatulla for taking her time and presenting to us. We're so honored and we're so lucky, I'm going to say, that, you know, sitting here in Toronto, we can connect with Ustadha Fatima in London and with the Hafida in Calgary, and inshallah bring you this programming. So inshallah, hopefully you can join us again for another Legacy Tour. May Allah bless you, your families, and hope to see you again, inshallah, soon. And I would like to leave you with a self-reflection question. After listening to this Legacy Tour, you know, what if you learned, what legacy would you like to leave behind? And what would you like to implement in your life? With that, I'd like to close with our closing dua. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.